Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are plunging into a spectacular and just incredibly sharp historical trajectory. We're talking about the life and death of the Sikh Empire.
It's a fascinating topic. A major indigenous power in the subcontinent built on centuries of this really profound religious identity.
Right, but its political sovereignty, its actual time as an empire, lasted for, what, a mere 50 years?
Barely that. It's history on fast forward, really.
Yeah.
And when you analyze the 19th century political landscape of South Asia, the Sikh Empire, it just stands out.
How so?
Well, not just because it was the last major kingdom to seriously challenge the British East India Company, but because of its unique origin. It's a classic case of a really rapid ascent followed by a total institutional collapse.
That sets up our central contradiction perfectly. So our mission today is to figure out how a decentralized, peaceful religious movement founded way back in the 15th century.
How it managed to transform itself into a unified military state, powerful enough to control a territory stretching from the Khyber Pass to the Sutlej River.
Exactly. And then for that entire political structure to just vanish completely within a single decade after its founder died.
And we have to start by clarifying that origin story, because that is the fundamental difference. I mean, if you look at the fragmentation of the Mughal Empire in the 18th century, you see all these new states emerging: Awadh, Bengal, Hyderabad.
Right. And these were largely formed by powerful Mughal governors who were just sort of breaking away.
Precisely. They were essentially successor states.
Yeah.
They were built on pre-existing Mughal administrative blueprints. They just kept the system going.
So they retained the tax structures, the bureaucracy, the official language. It was really just a change in management, not a change in the core system itself.
You've got it. But Punjab was the grand exception. The state that emerged there was not formed by some rebellious Mughal bureaucrat or governor.
No, it was formed by a local community-based group, the Sikhs.
Based on a distinct religious and political identity that had been evolving for, 2 centuries. And this path rooted in grassroots community building rather than administrative default, is the key to understanding both their success and ultimately their vulnerability.
That distinction is so crucial. So let's unpack that religious foundation in part one, the transformation from disciple to soldier. This story begins in the 15th century, right around 1469, in the heart of the Punjab region.
And this is happening, at the same time as the very establishment of the Mughal dynasty. The two stories grew up together in a way.
So we begin with Guru Nanak Dev.
We do. The name Sikh itself is derived from Sanskrit, and it literally means learner or disciple. The faith he established was, at its core, spiritual. It emphasized devotion to one God, simplicity, and maybe most radically for the time, the absolute equality of all people.
Which was a direct challenge to the existing social order.
A huge challenge. It rejected the rigidity of the caste systems. It rejected religious bigotry. It was a message that resonated tremendously, particularly among the lower castes and the politically significant Jat peasantry in Punjab.
Why them specifically?
Well, they were looking for an equitable social structure. Sikhism offered them this powerful, accessible alternative to the established powers of the time, both religious and political.
What's fascinating to me is how quickly the subsequent gurus focused on creating institutional resilience. It's like they knew that belief alone wasn't enough.
Exactly. The community needed social and linguistic anchors to maintain cohesion and identity. It needed a structure.
So let's detail those foundational building blocks. After Guru Nanak, we have the second guru, Angad Dev.
And his contribution was just profound. He standardized the Gurumukhi script.
Which is such a critical step in cultural independence. It gives the community its own written language, separate from the dominant Persian or Sanskrit.
It fosters a distinct literary and religious culture. But he also solidified another institution, the Langar.
The free communal kitchen. It's easy to understate this, but it was an engine of social change, wasn't it?
It absolutely was. It physically mandated equality.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. The rich and the poor, the high caste and the low caste, they all had to sit side by side and eat the very same food.
It builds extraordinary social cohesion. It erases those internal class and caste distinctions, which makes the community so much stronger than just the sum of its parts.
And the architecture just kept building from there. The third guru, Amar Das, he composed the Anand Sahib and introduced the simple Sikh marriage rites, the Anand Karaj.
So giving the community its own distinct social ceremonies? And critically, he took a clear stance against existing practices by abolishing sati among Sikhs.
which again reinforces their social and moral independence. By the time we get to the fourth guru, Ram Das, the community has reached a level of resource consolidation where it needs a geographical center,
So he founded the city of Amritsar and began construction of its central shrine.
which was then completed by the fifth guru, Arjan Dev. He finished the Golden Temple, solidifying the community's spiritual capital.
But more importantly, he compiled the Adi Granth.
A monumental task. This act collected the teachings of all the previous gurus and other saints, establishing the definitive textual authority of the faith. But right here, at this peak of religious and institutional consolidation, the story takes a very violent turn.
It feels almost inevitable looking back.
It was an inevitable clash. As the community's wealth, its popularity, its self-sufficiency grew, the Mughal state, well, it saw it not just as a religious sect anymore.
They saw it as a growing temporal authority, a challenge to the central mandate.
Exactly. And the relationship soured rapidly, especially under the Emperor Jahangir.
And the first major catalyst was the execution of Guru Arjan Dev himself. He was tortured and killed by the Mughals. This wasn't just random persecution, was it?
No, not at all. The Mughals were very wary of his influence, and his refusal to amend the Adi Granth to remove portions they found objectionable was the final straw.
That murder must have forced a radical self-assessment upon the community.
It did. Piety, social cohesion, spiritual truth, they were all proving to be insufficient shields against raw political violence. The community realized they needed the capacity for self-defense. This moment marks the definitive pivot.
From purely spiritual devotion, what they call piri, to the necessity of temporal and military engagement, miri.
And the response was decisive. It came from the sixth guru, Hargobind. He is famously known as the soldier saint.
So he immediately embraced this martial necessity.
Immediately. He introduced the martial art of Gatka, he began maintaining an armed retinue, and he constructed the Akal Takat, the throne of the Timeless One.
And he built it right opposite the Golden Temple. The symbolism there is just unmistakable.
Absolutely. This structure was physically and metaphorically dedicated to temporal power. It served as the seat of justice and military strategy. The proximity of the two structures, the spiritual and the temporal, it symbolized the new reality. Devotion and defense were now inseparable.
There was a brief period of avoidance under the seventh guru, Har Rai, who kept the army but tried to stay out of conflict.
And a very short time under the young eighth guru, Har Krishan. But the central existential threat, that threat posed by the Mughal state, it remained, especially under the increasingly fundamentalist Emperor Aurangzeb.
And that tension just exploded again with the ninth guru, Teg Babur.
It did. His travels and his growing influence outside of Punjab were seen as a direct threat when he actively stood up for religious freedom, refusing to convert to Islam under state pressure.
His execution by Aurangzeb served as an undeniable state-mandated warning: conform or be destroyed.
If Guru Arjan Dev's martyrdom was the decision to arm, then Guru Tegh Bahadur's execution was the mandate for total resistance. This brings us to the ultimate transformation.
The 10th guru, Guru Gobind Singh.
Guru Gobind Singh understood that a reactive defense was simply unsustainable. He needed a permanent, unified, and psychologically committed military force. So in 1699, he formally transformed the Sikhs into the Khalsa, the pure ones.
This was a total identity transformation. Membership in the Khalsa required adherence to the 5 Ks.
The Kesh, uncut hair, symbolizing devotion and acceptance of God's will. The Kanga, a wooden comb for cleanliness. The Kara, a steel bracelet, symbolizing eternal commitment. The Kacha, drawstring shorts, for discipline and preparedness. And of course,
Kirpan, the sword, symbolizing the obligation to defend the weak and the faith.
this act permanently fused the spiritual commitment of the Sikh with the warrior identity. It created the ideal soldier saint. It was a revolutionary act that dissolved previous social ties and created this brotherhood dedicated absolutely to defense.
And this foundational structure, the Khalsa, is what endured long after the political empire itself dissolved.
What's also fascinating about the Khalsa is that Guru Gobind Singh ended the line of human guruship with himself. He formalized that spiritual authority was now vested in the Granth, the holy book.
And temporal political authority.
That was passed to the Panth, the collective community of all initiated Sikhs. This is a truly revolutionary move for sovereignty in South Asia.
It feels incredibly forward-thinking.
Oh, absolutely. The decision was genius in the long run, even if it created some short-term problems. It prevented the community's future from being dependent on a single leader who could be, corruptible or assassinated. It was a deeply decentralized, almost democratic form of religious and political leadership. It was designed for survival through collective action.
Okay, moving into part two, let's examine the brutal reality of translating that collective identity into actual political power. The early 18th century, especially the years between 1708 and 1765, they're just defined by extreme political chaos.
And the development of these decentralized power structures, the first test of that collective leadership came immediately. After Guru Gobind Singh was assassinated in 1708, the responsibility for armed resistance passed to Banda Bahadur, also known as Banda Bairagi.
Banda Bahadur was a figure of just immense energy. He led this ferocious 8-year war of retribution against the Mughals.
And he achieved initial, startling success. He captured territory, even issued his own coins. He was establishing a nascent, centralized Sikh state.
But this is where we see the immediate challenge of centralized power without a guru.
We do. Banda Bahadur's attempt at a formal state structure, it really struggled. Sources suggest he was weakened by internal disagreements over strategy and his leadership style. Some elements of the community, the Tat Khalsa, felt he was overstepping the Panth's authority.
So his eventual execution in 1716 after brutal torture demonstrated that while the Sikhs had the strength to fight and win, they still lacked something.
They lacked the centralized institutional infrastructure needed to withstand the full might of the Mughal state, especially when it focused all of its attention on them.
So the immediate attempt at a unified, centralized state failed. But the community survived, ready to seize the next opportunity.
And that opportunity arrived courtesy of the spectacular collapse of the external power structure in Punjab. This political vacuum is the critical catalyst for the eventual empire.
You really have to picture the political chessboard in the 18th century.
You do. First, the central Mughal authority was just hemorrhaging power throughout the region. The governors in Punjab were increasingly autonomous, but they lacked the resources or the loyalty to really command the area effectively. That created a power gap.
But the real clearing of the field came from outside. These continuous foreign invasions essentially destroyed any remaining central control.
That's right. Starting in 1739 with Nadir Shah's invasion, which just sacked Delhi, and then followed by the repeated invasions of Ahmed Shah Abdali, the Afghan leader.
And these weren't just raids. They were catastrophic military and economic destructions of the Punjab province. The Mughals were proven utterly incapable of protecting their own territory.
This created a unique opportunity. You have to understand, the established administration was pulverized. The roads were unsafe, the tax structure collapsed, and there was no credible local authority left.
This situation favored a highly mobile, armed, community-based group, a group like the Khalsa.
And just as important was the removal of the other indigenous giant, the Marathas.
Right. The Marathas were arguably the strongest indigenous power in the subcontinent at the time, and they had designs on North India, including Punjab.
But fate intervened. In 1761, at the Third Battle of Panipat, the Afghans decisively defeated the Marathas. This single event was a geopolitical gift to the Sikhs.
It eliminated their primary non-Mughal rival for control of the entire northern region.
So, by the mid-1760s, the field was clear. The Mughals were destroyed from within and without, the Marathas were defeated and pushed south, and the foreign invaders, the Afghans, well, they found it was too costly to maintain permanent control over such a volatile region.
It created the perfect, lawless vacuum.
And the chaos was further guaranteed by local infighting, particularly the civil wars among the sons of the Mughal governor Zakaria Khan. The result was total instability.
And the community structure, the Panam, was perfectly designed to fill this void.
This is where that decentralized structure really proved its worth. Starting around 1765, the Sikhs began systematically filling that political gap, and they developed a unique political structure that balanced regional control with a shared identity.
The Missals.
The Missals. They were confederacies, organized primarily around charismatic leaders and reinforced by kinship ties. The term misl itself can be interpreted as meaning alike or state.
It's a horizontally structured polity, right? Power wasn't vested in a capital city or a single king.
Not at all. It was distributed among 12 relatively independent mobile bands. They operated like regional warlords. They controlled specific territories, maintained their own armies, and collected revenue. You had the Bangis, the Aluwalias, and, significantly for our story, the Sukrachakiyas.
But if they were all independent regional warlords, how did they prevent themselves from just collapsing into continuous civil war? Was there any mechanism for unity?
There was, though it was intermittent. They occasionally convened the Sarbat Khalsa, which was the Grand Assembly of the Khalsa.
A political gathering of all the Misl chiefs.
usually held at the Akal Takat in Amritsar, and often in response to an external threat, like a new Afghan invasion. This assembly would pass resolutions known as Gurmatas, which theoretically bound all the missiles together.
So they had decentralized regional control most of the time, but the deep religious identity and the constant external threat provided a pressure valve, a way to temporarily centralize command when survival required it.
But this system still meant power was fundamentally fractured. A unified empire, one capable of dealing with the emerging power of the British, required one figure to consolidate all the decentralized might.
And that brings us to the zenith of the empire, the right man in the right place at the perfect time.
Maharaja Ranjit Singh.
Welcome to part 3, the zenith of empire under Maharaja Ranjit Singh. He is truly the transformative figure, the Sher-e Punjab. He had to be a military genius, yes, but also a political master to transition from the decentralized chaos of the missiles into a unified, functioning state.
His rise is astonishing. He started as the chief of the comparatively minor Sukhar-Chakya missile. His initial mission was pure political calculus.
He recognized that the continuous infighting among the 12 missiles was a long-term liability.
It made them vulnerable to both the Afghans in the north and the British moving up from the south. He understood that political legitimacy was key. So his first major conquest, Lahore, in 1799, was just brilliant.
Because Lahore was the traditional political capital of Punjab, taking it established his secular authority.
And then, 3 years later, in 1802, he conquered Amritsar, giving him control of the religious capital.
So once he controlled both the political and the spiritual centers, he had the platform to demand allegiance from the other Missile chiefs.
Often through military force, but sometimes through shrewd marriage alliances or just clever political maneuvering.
And once unified, the state just exploded outwards. Ranjit Singh consolidated the Sikh heartlands and then expanded aggressively, conquering major territories.
Kashmir, Peshawar, Multan. By the 1820s, the Sikh Empire controlled a vast, strategically critical domain right at the doorstep of Central Asia.
But holding this sprawling territory together required more than just conquest. It required a modern administration. And this is where Ranjit Singh truly shines as a progressive ruler.
He immediately set about transforming the military. He recognized that the traditional cavalry and the decentralized missile infantry, while brave, could not stand against the disciplined battalions of the British or the Afghan heavy artillery.
So he prioritized military modernization.
He utilized European instructors, former Napoleonic officers, French, Italian, even American mercenaries, to train his infantry and artillery.
Figures like Jean-François Allard and Paolo Diavitabile were instrumental, right?
They were. They created the Fauji Cause, or the Special Brigade, which was famous for its discipline, its uniformity, and its adherence to European tactics. This was a professional standing army, radically different from the earlier missile militias.
What I find most remarkable and what speaks directly to that foundational Sikh philosophy is the incredible diversity of that professional army. It wasn't just a Khalsa army.
Not at all. It was an army of meritocracy. It included Gorkhas, Dogras, Pathans, Biharis, and Punjabi Muslims serving as high-ranking officers and soldiers.
So he ensured that recruitment and promotion were based on performance, not just religious affiliation.
And that kind of loyalty transcends community lines. It gives the army unparalleled resilience and skill.
Let's talk about the economy needed to fund this modern military. He was pragmatic enough to maintain administrative continuity where it made sense.
Yes, he retained the Mughal land revenue system, but he executed it with ruthless efficiency. The state charged a very high rate, 50% of the gross agricultural produce.
That's a heavy burden on the peasantry.
It was, but it was efficiently collected and standardized. And it provided the enormous capital base necessary to pay and equip his professional army, which, consumed the bulk of the state's budget.
So he was able to maintain stability, partly because of his financial acumen, but also due to his exceptional secularism and tolerance. How did that tolerance manifest politically in a court dominated by the Khalsa?
Well, it manifested in his appointments. Ranjit Singh was a devout Sikh, but his administration was thoroughly pluralistic. He patronized holy men from all faiths, Sikh, Hindu, and Muslim. He famously ordered that the minarets of the Badshahi Mosque in Lahore be protected and maintained.
And we see this reflected in the highest ranks of his court. His trusted foreign minister, Fakir Azizuddin, was a Muslim.
And his finance minister, Diwan Dinanath, was a Hindu. These weren't symbolic appointments. These were critical decision-making roles.
By appointing trusted ministers from diverse faiths, he mitigated the risk of internal dissent and rebellion.
He ensured loyalty across the region's diverse populations. He wasn't just ruling over the Khalsa, he was ruling over Punjab. This pluralistic administration was one of the absolute pillars of his stability.
But no matter how modern his army or shrewd his administration, the expansion of the Sikh Empire inevitably meant a confrontation with the other rapidly expanding power in the region.
The British East India Company.
Absolutely. By the early 1800s, the British had consolidated control over the Ganges Valley and were pushing steadily north towards the Sutlej River. Conflict was guaranteed unless one side was willing to negotiate a hard boundary.
And Ranjit Singh chose negotiation. In 1809, he signed the incredibly important Treaty of Amritsar.
So what did that treaty actually solidify, and what were its lasting implications?
The treaty was a recognition of reality. The British recognized Ranjit Singh as the sole sovereign ruler of the territory north of the Sutlej River.
Which was a major diplomatic victory for the Sikh Empire. It cemented his control over the heartlands.
It did, but the cost was immense. In exchange, Ranjit Singh was required to cease all attempts to conquer the Sikh states south of the Sutlej.
So the British took control of the Sikh principalities in the south. This created what became known as the Cis-Sutlej states.
That's right. These were small Sikh territories like Patiala, Nabha, and Jind, situated south of the river and north of Delhi. After the 1809 treaty, they became British protectorates.
So the treaty created a permanent, impenetrable wedge. Ranjit Singh was recognized as sovereign, but the British had established a protected buffer zone right on his border.
And this permanently restricted the geographic expansion of the Sikh Empire toward the rich markets and resources of the Ganges Plain.
It bought him time, though.
It bought Ranjit Singh time, nearly 3 decades of peace, to consolidate and expand north and west, which he did spectacularly, conquering Multan and Peshawar. But the treaty also dictated the empire's ultimate fate. It established the boundary that would eventually become the battle line for the Anglo-Sikh Wars.
It turned the Sutlej into the political tripwire for the entire subcontinent.
And that brings us to part 4, which is perhaps the most tragic and detailed part of the narrative, the rapid collapse.
After all the careful, unified building under Ranjit Singh, the state just unraveled almost instantly.
The stability of the empire was fundamentally tied to the genius of one man. Ranjit Singh created the state, administered the state, and commanded the loyalty of the army.
Once he was gone, the inherent fragility of the political structure, which still retained elements of that decentralized, miscelcal factionalism just beneath the surface, became fatal.
And we see the signs of diminishing sovereignty even before his death. The British, sensing his declining health, began applying intense diplomatic pressure, particularly concerning their ambitions in Afghanistan.
This culminated in 1838 with the Tripartite Treaty.
Right. Ranjit Singh was pressured by the British to ally with them, and Shah Shuja, an unpopular exiled Afghan ruler, the British wanted to reinstall in Kabul.
Why was this such a significant erosion of sovereignty?
Because the British forced Ranjit Singh to allow British troops, equipment, and supply trains to pass through Punjab to attack Kabul. This wasn't a choice, it was a concession.
It proved that the British now held the decisive geopolitical advantage.
Using Sikh territory for their own strategic aims is a clear signal to the Sikh court and the army that the Sheri Punjab was constrained. And this diplomatic humiliation was deeply resented by the fiercely proud Khalsa military.
And then, the critical failure. The single event that historians agree just detonated the political structure. Ranjit Singh died in June 1839.
The sources are all clear. This was a catastrophe. Ranjit Singh had done a brilliant job creating an army and an administration, but he had failed to institutionalize a reliable succession process.
And his immediate successors were either inept or met with disaster.
Let's detail that succession crisis because it is the engine of anarchy. His son, Karak Singh, succeeded him, but he was considered weak and easily manipulated by competing court factions.
And he reigned for only a few months before being imprisoned and allegedly poisoned.
The power then briefly passed to his son, Nandihal Singh, who was a more promising figure. However, in a tragic and highly suspicious incident, Nandihal Singh died within days of his father, supposedly in an accident while returning from the cremation ceremony.
This sudden, successive elimination of legitimate heirs threw the court into absolute chaos. Who stepped into the vacuum?
The vacuum was immediately filled by internal power struggles. often fueled by the Dogra faction high-caste Hindu ministers and courtiers from the Jammu region who held tremendous influence.
And they exploited the instability.
Completely.
Hmm.
Manipulating puppet rulers and engaging in assassinations and betrayals to gain control. The next few years were just a bloody merry-go-round of short-lived rulers and regents.
And what happened to the powerful professional army Ranjit Singh had so meticulously built?
It became ungovernable. The army, the Khalsa military, recognized the corruption and instability of the court and took political power into its own hands. It effectively transformed itself into a kind of military republic.
How did that mechanism work?
The regiments organized themselves into councils of soldiers, known as panchayats, or committees of five. These panchayats effectively seized control of policy. They demanded higher pay, influenced court decisions, and deposed or installed ministers at will.
So the state's resources were just drained.
Drained by the military's demands and the rampant corruption needed to keep the soldiers loyal. The centralized financial system established by Ranjit Singh dissolved back into factionalism, but this time with a fully armed, demanding, and politically active military.
So the state basically cannibalized itself from the inside. Meanwhile, the British East India Company was just watching this instability from the Sis-Sutlej state's border.
Watching and waiting, and maintaining a continuous buildup of troops and supplies.
They exploited the crisis perfectly.
They did. They understood that the powerful Khalsa army was their one true military threat. But they also recognized that the internal court politics, particularly the rise of Rani Jindal as regent for the young Duleep Singh, was fracturing the command structure.
Did the court try to use the British threat to unify the army at all?
Yes. There's a very strong argument that elements within the Sikh court, desperate to regain control over the military, deliberately provoked the Khalsa to cross the Sutlej River boundary in late 1845.
What was the hope there?
The hope was that by sending the army into conflict with the British, the court could either regain control of the army's attention or, failing that, see the powerful, unruly Khalsa military annihilated by the British.
That strategy backfired spectacularly. It led directly to the First Anglo-Sikh War in 1845.
And despite the Khalsa's formidable fighting ability, especially its artillery, the command structure was compromised.
How so?
Crucially, key Sikh commanders, allegedly acting under court orders, engaged in tactical betrayals. They failed to support the main forces at crucial moments. The result was a British victory.
And the subsequent treaty was punitive.
Very. It forced the Sikh state to pay a massive indemnity and cede large territories, including Kashmir, which the British promptly sold to the Dogra ruler Gulab Singh.
This action, selling Kashmir to a Dogra rival, must have been deeply humiliating. It confirmed the Sikh state's loss of autonomy.
But the political structure, though weakened, still survived, temporarily. The British installed a resident Sir Henry Lawrence in Lahore, effectively stripping the Sikh state of any true sovereignty.
And the final act came quickly.
Very quickly. Internal friction, resentment over the British presence, and continued administrative chaos led to localized rebellions. The British used these rebellions as a pretext for the Second Anglo-Sikh War in 1848-1849.
And this time, there were no compromises.
None. Following decisive British victories, most notably at Gujarat, the British East India Company formally annexed Punjab in 1849.
Just 10 years after the death of its founder, the sovereign Sikh state ceased to exist.
Its territory was absorbed, and its legendary army was disbanded, though many Sikhs would later be integrated into the British military structures. It is a stunning meteoric collapse that stands as the final act of indigenous resistance before the full consolidation of British power in India.
So what does this all mean for you, the learner, taking this deep dive with us? Let's recap the critical 3 phases of this uniquely short historical trajectory.
First, we observe how the spiritual foundation evolved through profound religious and social reform, culminating in the creation of the Khalsa, a permanent soldier-saint identity born out of necessary defensive resistance against Mughal persecution. This was the engine of survival.
Secondly, we detailed the political chaos and vacuum of the 18th century. The collapse of the Mughals and the strategic removal of the Marathas created the open field that the decentralized Mizils were uniquely positioned to fill, proving the community's capacity for regional governance.
And third, that brief, brilliant period of consolidation under Maharaja Ranjit Singh. His singular genius in modernization and secular administration created the state, but because the underlying political structure had not matured beyond reliance on his personal charisma and political force.
The rapid collapse was precipitated entirely by his death. and the resulting succession crisis, which was then exploited by the British.
The narrative underscores that the state's rapid formation built locally and quickly filling a vacuum also meant it lacked the deep institutional roots that might have stabilized it during that succession crisis.
It proved to be a magnificent but ultimately temporary political superstructure.
And this leads us to our final provocative thought for you to consider. The political state, the geographic empire of Ranjit Singh, was temporary. It vanished completely in 1849. But what survived?
The structures created by the gurus.
Exactly. The community structure of the Khalsa and the distinct political identity forged during the Misl era, they outlasted the monarchy. The state was a short-lived monarchy, but the identity was a permanent defensive community structure.
So the enduring legacy of the Sikh story is the profound difference between political power, which is transient and vulnerable to succession.
And community identity, which is durable and resilient to external conquest.
When facing an existential threat, the ultimate success isn't necessarily establishing a sovereign state that will inevitably fall, but rather establishing a permanent, self-sustaining community identity that endures long after the political maps are redrawn.
The Khalsa survived the Mughals, the Afghans, and ultimately the collapse of their own empire, continuing to shape the subcontinent long after the Union Jack flew over Lahore. That is the true deep dive takeaway.